The major change on this document that you're going to see from last week's 1.2 version, if you go down to line number 43, the allowable living limit. So the Department of Revenues released out the finalized increase that we're up for our allowable increase. It equated to approximately $56,248. So we're up from $6,638,000 and change to $6,694,000 and change. And this includes then your increases for new construction, and then also presumably the TIF closed center is also included in here. So there's $56,248 increase that you're seeing in that line number 43 on page 1. The next changes that we've talked about and have taken action upon are going to be reflected throughout the document in its entirety. The proposal to move the general wages from 4.5% to 5%. Those changes have not been incorporated into the final document yet, as we're going to figure out what we're going to do with health insurance and then push that all out and bring it back at once. So the document, correction, they have been included in here. So we changed it from 4.5% to 5%, and those are going to be reflected though throughout all the different expenditure lines for the different departments that impact wages. Reduction in the administrator's office. We did the reduction of $3,500 to balance with the putting in the part-time child support position. That's reflected in page 3, line 10. You'll see a reduction there of $3,500. Register of Deeds, change in their software. There was motion to allow for that type of a change. So that's a $6,000 increase that you're going to see on page 3, line 34. So those are the main changes that are going to be reflected on the page 3. Moving on to page 4, this is continued expenditures for public safety and health and social services impacts. Main changes on this page, the ambulance increases from 4.5% in wages to 5 plus a step are impacted on page 4, line 49. And again, those are intended to be covered by the revenues, which reflect in page 10, line 104. Pine Valley wages, their increase from initial adjustment of 3.5% to 5% plus a step is also included in this summary. And that's reflected on page 4, line 71, which is their expenditures. And that's offset by revenues on page 10, line 107. The totals in this amount, though, if you remember from our initial presentation, are adjusted, though, because we're not including the depreciation expenditures in these types of the numbers in our system. They include their depreciation as an expenditure for their purposes, but in the AS400 system, we take out the depreciation. So in the 9.558 reflects the same then for revenues and expenditures with no levy impact. Child support position is reflected on page 4, line 77, with the increase of that part-time position. And we also then did the reductions in the airport budget, which was reflected on page 4, line 89. And again, that was also to offset the balance for the child support position. The changes to the UW extension and reincorporating their operation amounts of roughly 4,000, a little over 4,000, reflects in page 5, line 113. Moving down then through the rest of your expenditures, continue through page 6, you'll see county planning, county development, and getting our debt service. Again, this budget does not reflect the tower project at this time. If and when we do the borrowing in January and February, we'll do a budget amendment to show those monies in and then expenditures out. On to page 7 now, we start in our revenues. Major revenues changes are on page 8. Page 8, line 41 is going to show the sheriff's revenues for their, here, page 8, line 41. You can look at here. Page 8, line 41. The state aid sanctions amount that are projected for the sheriff's office. This is incorporated into the budget now. A previous version of the 1.2 did not have those in there. They initially, in response to the preliminary budget, anticipated $108,000 of revenues. After further evaluating it, that has been brought down to 60,000. And that's the number that arrives here in a new line item for the budget, page 8, line 41. The PSC broadband grant is also included in revenues, reflecting that conversation. Page 7, 189, that reflects where that amount is. That's the $295,000. And that is a money in for grant expenditures also going out. Expenditures are reflected in page 11, line 157. So that's where we're at as of right now for your budget with these 4 decisions that are awaiting for you yet today. We have to figure out what we're doing with health insurance. Those numbers will impact then across the different expenditure lines. HRAs, if we're transitioning to the ETF plan, the proposal on that package was a reduction of the HRA contributions. Those will be also then reflected in the different department expenditure lines. We also have to incorporate the 1 week holdback is planned. The last payroll in June, we plan on pushing folks' compensations out 1 other week. So then we have a 2 week withholding. So we're able to submit time cards that are true and accurate rather than estimates and guesses that we're continually going back and fixing. So that will shift 1 week of compensations essentially out into 2024. And then also then land conservation has a reduction of 1 family health insurance plan. New employee is participating on spousal plans, so we can reduce that. So those are 4 changes hinged on kind of 1 decision yet today. And then of course, everything is still balanced on ARPA funds. If you look on page 11, underneath your revenue lines, page 11, line 156, is everything is getting balanced off of that line. Line 11, 156. Currently, this budget is about $760,000 built on ARPA funds, which kind of also represents your structural deficit. These funds are, there's not a solid revenue source to make up this gap right now, other than ARPA. With the offsets in health insurance coming down, HRA coming down, and the 1 week withholding, this number should actually get smaller yet for 2023. So if you're visualizing out of 1.6, maybe this comes down to about 600,000 that you're going to have for this year. And then that leaves you with about $1 million to work with for 2024 budget and 2025 budget to try to fix that gap, because that revenue source is going to drive after that. ARPA funds can be have to be designated for a purpose in 2024 and final expenditure in 2025. So pending all that information, if there the finalized action language that I'll be looking for today is to accept the finalized budgets with amendments reflecting decisions on health insurance plan, which is yet to be determined yet, and direct administration and departments to make adjustments accordingly, direct the county clerk to make necessary public posting, and present to the Richland County Board for consideration and adoption at its October meeting. If there are adjustments that you would like to be considered today, I guess that we would go back and reference probably the gap tracker sheet, which has the different elements of it and the costing, and we would be doing the balance game that way. Your other balance factor is on your ARPA funds, which again is approximately 1.6. Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So we can't really do anything right at this moment until we rest on our agenda.
Well, I'm looking if there's any other types of actions that you want to take on it, and I would be, if you're willing to entertain it to pass the budget with adjustments to be made, we're going to have to, we'll make the adjustments regardless. So it won't be a finalized document that you're going to be approving, but if you're willing to take action on it to recommend it moving forward as discussed with amendments reflecting decisions on health insurance plan, that would be the final decision unless you have other adjustments that you want to incorporate into the plan.
Okay, Finance Committee members, what's your pleasure here? We have other?
I'd make a motion, we do that.
Mr. Manning makes the motion that we proceed with final resolution on item 16 on our agenda. Do I have a second? No second?
Can it wait until we do the health insurance and just do it all at once?
Pardon?
Can't we just wait until we talk about the health insurance and then just pass it all at once?
Well, that's what I thought we could do, but,
If you want to wait, you're gonna arrive at the same motion language.
yeah, we,
If you'd like to wait and talk on health insurance and see where we arrive at that, that's fine.
That makes more sense to me, that's all.
Okay.
Whatever, I'll do whatever you guys want.
well, the motion dies for lack of a second. So we'll take it up later on the agenda.
Mr. Chair, if we have questions about the budget, is this the time to ask, or should we wait till we talk about that?
No, number 6, discussion and possible action on 23 budget. So we're in that part of the agenda, so I would say questions and explanations are in order here. So go ahead, Mr. Murphy-Lopez.
Okay, I just wanted to ask, it sounds like we are increasing the operating levy per net new construction. Is that right, Mr. Langrick?
The increase on our allowable limit is $56,248, and that includes then consideration for that new construction, then the TID close. So all those get totaled into the total increase that is allowed through the Department of Revenues.
Okay, I was thinking that the last time we talked about this at the last meeting, taxes would actually be going down, that we wouldn't be using that increase. And did you change that between our last meeting and this meeting?
We did it. We put it up to the maximum allowable limit.
Okay. Okay, yeah, that answers my question there. With the radio tower project, I know you mentioned that we might be doing a budget amendment. I'm a little confused about that because
Can you get closer to your mic perhaps?
I'll try here. I'm about 5 inches away, but the radio tower project, you mentioned that would require a budget amendment, but if we did the borrowing in 23, wouldn't we start paying back the loan in 24? So why would we be doing a budget amendment? That's my question there.
A couple of the different things on reflecting if we're going to do, how the expenditures are going to line up, and if you're going to borrow all of it, or if you're going to try to, depending on how referendum sorts out for 2024, if you're going to try to use ARPA funds for it. There's several different variables that might impact you, how you want to pay for that and when you want to pay for it.
Okay, that helps. So if there's anything on the operating side, that's why you're saying we might have to do a budget amendment. But if it's all on the debt side, that would not require a budget amendment. Is that right?
We'd have expenditures potentially going out. Again, it's going to depend on, I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball to know exactly where we're going on the radio tower project and the referendum. But yes, the overall, if it's an operational change to the operational funds coming in for 2023, then we would be.
Okay. And then on different department budgets, so say I wanted to know what's happening with a random department, say the clerk of circuit court or fairgrounds or what have you. So how can I tell how the budget is changing between the current adopted budget and the proposed 2023 budget? Can I see what % change a department has?
1 second. Let's see if I can get this to pull up.
Mr. Chair, this is Derek. I can help answer that question, Clint.
Yeah, go ahead, Derek.
Go ahead, Derek, please.
Distribution by department.
Okay, my iPad's kind of delayed, guys. Sorry. So, but Supervisor Murphy Lopez, to your question. So, after the budget's entered into the 400, there is a report that can be ran that's called the expenditure budget comparison, and that calculates all the different budgets from 2019 through the current, and then shows what the 2023 requested amount is. And then the last column on that thing will tell you the, percentage differentiation between the 2 years, 2 fiscal years. Is that what you were asking?
Well, that is what I'm looking for. It doesn't sound like we have that available to us today.
The report would have to be ran from the 400 that would break out, that would display that for each, for each account. So it's a report that's typically generated after committees have submitted their budgets that can be presented. I wasn't aware that anyone wanted to see that. So it can be provided to you on a department basis.
Yeah, well, I think it'd be great to see that. This is really the first time we're diving into the budget, if I remember correctly. We haven't discussed it at the finance committee, so it's kind of the first opportunity. So that's why I'm bringing it up today. I think it would be helpful, and I'm kind of curious too. Well, how did certain departments do last year? I know one comment was made when the referendum committee presented a report. I believe it was to the land and zoning committee. Someone said, well, I thought your budget was this, and they said, well, this was the proposed 2022 budget, and we've never been able to see what kind of the actual dollars are. What I'm getting at is departments. I'm not sure. I'd be curious to know if they're overspending or underspending, and maybe that's later in the agenda. But that would be nice to kind of know. It'd be nice to kind of know how closely they're following the proposed budget. I might not be making sense there, and I apologize. But another question I had was about Pine Valley. Do we have any? Is there anything in the proposed 2023 budget for Pine Valley profits offsetting expenses at the county?
There is a revenue line in the budget for, I don't know if you're referring to the amount of money that
We're looking at
Pine
page
Valley,
11.
so there is $300,000 that I believe Clint had a conversation with Tom to give that back.
It is under page 11, line 160. It shows as Pine Valley surplus applied.
Okay, great. That answers my question there. Thank you.
Let me pull that up here. I'm sorry. I can share that too. I didn't realize I had my.
Okay, Mr. Murphy Lopez, does that answer the questions you had right now?
Yes, Mr. Chair, it does.
Okay. I think we'll move along then.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. C, I see your name on the screen. Go ahead.
Yeah. So would a question be in order at this time regarding this document before us?
I'll allow you to ask a question, Mr. C.
I'm wondering if this document includes data from all of the departments and a review by each of the departments' committees forwarded to this prior to putting this document together. Have all of the committees viewed their budget and forwarded it with a recommendation?
Is this a loaded question, Mr. C?
No, it's not. It's not a loaded question. I want to know.
Okay, I'll refer to Administrator Langrick. Can you answer that?
I don't have a report today on which ones have been shown to their supervisory committees and what actions may have been taken by the committees.
So we don't know the answer to that. We certainly assume that the budgets have been reviewed by the respective committees.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
I can comment directly on public safety and land and zoning. Both committees have seen the budgets for all of the
okay.
departments that report to them.
All right, Supervisor Luck reports that land and zoning and public safety have reviewed their.
Yes. HHS and veterans have not yet reviewed the 23 budget.
Okay. I think they probably should get to it.
I believe it's on the agenda for their next meeting
Thank
on
you.
the 29th.
Good. we'll be taking some action today, and it can be revisited, I suppose, until we have the public hearing and we put the budget in the books. Barring any great changes, though, we're going to be taking some action today so we can move along. Discussion and possible action on response to resolution 2296.
That's Administrator Langren. Yep, that is me, Mr. Chair. Let me this document opened up here and then I'll pull it up on the screen to share. Second. Here we go. Okay, Mr. Chair, looking today for a motion to recommend proposal, proposed finance and operational changes necessary in responding to the directives of Resolution 2296, either as presented or with amendments. Your motion today may also be, the second motion might be to recommend the proposed financial and operational changes be forwarded to the referendum ad hoc committee for consideration to be added to the referendum. So two possible action languages here recommended. There might be other ones that you arrive at. Background on this item is Resolution 2296 was adopted by the Richland County Board on August 16th, 2022, directing, be it further resolved, various standing committees listed below are tasked to work in conjunction with the county administrator, supporting staff, community partners to consider services, develop and evaluate options, and make a recommendation to the county board on future operations of the various departments and services listed below. Be it further resolved, Finance and Personnel Standing Committee is specifically tasked with the following regarding services provided through the county administrator, county clerk, county treasurer, county board and ancillary budgets, develop a recommended list of proposed projects, levy reductions in comparing them to the 2022 budget of $122,000 in 2024, $243,000 in 2025, $299,000 in 2026, $383,000 in 2027, including but not limited to lines 106 through 1.01 through 16.91, 13.01 through 14.91, 21.01 through 22.91 in the 5-year financial plan. Resolution response number 2296 is designed to help list out identified financial solutions to consider. Initial recommendations from administration and elected officials are indicated. Amendments can be actioned by the committee. Document in your folder will be referenced today as item number 07A. Slight delay while my computer opens it up.
While Administrator Langrick is getting that up, Mr. Seep, it occurs to me that the reason some of the committees have not had a chance to review is because this meeting today is not our regularly scheduled meeting. We moved it up so we could look at the health insurance question, because we were unable to answer that at our last meeting because all the employees had not been polled. So in the meantime, we've sent out a questionnaire, and I hope that we have that information before us when we get down to item 16. But that's why some of the committees have not had an opportunity. So if I sounded critical, I apologize.
So, Mr. Chair, document is pulled up here, very tiny. I don't know if anybody's going to be able to see that on the screen here. But this is in response to, so the different items here that you're, well, let me kind of talk through. So everything on the left-hand side, your options for reduction that you're seeing underneath the orange line is the option, and then it's sorted out by what department it's coming from and budget line, the service and function that it's going to impact, the dollar cost that it has, the year that the proposed reduction would be put into place, the service impact, any type of a workaround or alternative to try to continue delivering that service if it's lost, or if that position or that expenditure is implemented. And then a reference to where it is on the financial worksheet, and that kind of points back to the resolution language, kind of pointed to the different items on the financial planning to indicate those departments. And then the next item there is request consideration to add to the referendum levy exemption. Then it kind of breaks it down by years with a recommendation and then the total impacts that it could have to your budget. So you see underneath 2024, it has a directive to reduce total budgets by 122,000, 2025, 243,000, and then so on and so on. Items then that are put with a green yes are recommended by administration to consider, but everything out here is put out here with a costing for you folks also to consider, as some of them, as you see on the bottom, are not truly levy reduction exemptions, but more so some of them are displacements on taking operational levy expenses, putting them into consideration for debt service, which they're legally you can do. So the different items here that are appearing today, as you'll see on here, is the creation of an HR finance department combined. This was an initiative that was anticipated for 2024 on the financial planning sheet. This is recommended today to be a reduction. The next item is the creation of a finance department. This was forecasted out for 2027 as a recommended reduction. Creation of an HR department and a coordinator position that the second to is a finance officer dedicated full-time. Both of those then are reductions for 2027. The next one is a reduction of funds for staff training. That is a recommended reduction for 2024. That was built into the budget. Now that's actually a reduction that you'll see in 2023 as well, based on actions that we took to try to balance for the child support. Next one is your administrator position. It's on here at 101,000. Not recommended at this time, but you can switch back to an administrative coordinator form of government and assign that to a different person. It could be an employee, could be an elected official, can be a county board supervisor, but there is Supreme Court opinion that is inappropriate, but some counties still operate that way and nobody's called me on as of yet. Assistant to the administrator position is also on here, not recommended at this time, but is listed out with the cost. Accounting supervisor, the same, as well as a benefits specialist. With these all as well, there is different impacts that you would have to consider. With the assistant to the administrator, you would be reducing your expectations for project and strategic initiatives. With the accounting supervisor, we'd have to add those functions to a different position. Functions of the position are a full-time equivalent. Same thing with your benefits specialist payroll. Those would have to be pushed onto the positions remaining in the department or somehow pushed down to a department level to get those incorporated. Items for the clerk's county clerk office. You've got in here digitization of resolutions that is built into the budget. We have monies in there that is going forward with the ordinance, and that is a different item. This was to be additional funds to say, how do we also then try to build resolutions and get those digitized so we can find those digital format. Recommending that comes out and not recommending that gets put on the referendum, but it's just removed as an added expense. We'll try to use the existing software that we have with those ordinances and then in-house see if we can come up with a solution to possibly digitize our own resolutions. Part-time deputy county clerk is another proposal. You could reduce deputy clerk, be about a $27,000 expenditure reduction. Not recommended, but it is on here. Workarounds would be deputizing either accounting supervisor or some other position to try to continue to provide services. It would reduce our ability to do WIS votes, reduces ability of clerk to fulfill the finance duties. Remember, we do have Darren Musseltay with finance officer duties that we rely on heavily. And then part-time deputy position really kind of limited to do about accounts payable type of function. But it is on here and it is legally possible. County treasurer, flipping onto page 2, you'll see proposed reduction to eliminate property lister and merge duties amongst treasurer, deputy, and GIS. Now, do keep in mind that we're currently unable to retain GIS candidates with qualifications, so we're actually investigating one and now 2 different options to potentially contract our GIS services out. With that being said, it would make it a bigger challenge to try to displace those, but legally could be displaced under your treasurer and existing deputy. Borrowing for The GIS land software is also a consideration. It's about 28,000. This is for the GCS, your tax and property lister type of a software. Potentially with short-term notes, you could borrow for that in the future, but it's kind of a solid operational costs. You could displace it again potentially from your operational levy and put it into a debt service levy, which is exemption. Other budgetary items of consideration: Southwest Regional Planning, things going where they're at. So there's a recommendation potential for your consideration in 2025 to reduce expenditures in partnership with Southwest Regional Planning. Other items of consideration is short-term borrowing for property, workers' comp, and liability insurance. It is legal by state statute 67. It's generated a lot of conversation with ranks of administrators and executives at recent WCA leadership meetings and regional meetings. I mean, the best idea, again, you're putting your insurance payments kind of on your credit card, if you will, but it could be a legal displacement of your operations, again, into debt service or short term to allow for a levy exemption. With all these things that are recommended to push it into debt service, then the obvious is it going to displace or are you going to increase, which is added mill and added levy amounts for the next year. Video conferencing, same thing, $6,000 that's being put into there. Can we add that to a capital expense and again displace it from operations? Other items that are on here as well, admin clerk treasurer, reduction of hours potentially to a 4 days, 9 hours a day type of reduced office hours. Again, that comes to about a $40,000 reduction. Certainly has community impact though and service support for departments. If you wanted to further reduce that to 4 8-hour days, you're up to about $80,000. Again, that's a reduction in service availability, service hours. And finally on here, we have phased in reduction of hours. Rather than trying to do a reduction down with existing salaries, rather than doing future pay increases, we're doing reductions of hours. So you're still trying to retain an annual amount of a salary, but with reduced hours going forward. So it doesn't come to you as a savings and any type of proposal, but more of a way to do a zero line pay increase. So those are the options that have been entertained and recommended today for your discussion. You can see that the ones, again, initiated with a yes, recommend, then have the values carried down. But again, it's up to you folks to kind of consider these and then let us know where you'd like to have the service impacts. Mr. Chair.
Thank you. A lot to consider here, people. We're talking about some pretty profound changes in basically our administration area. So I'll listen to you, hear your comments. Basically, the administrator has recommended that we not go ahead with our human resources, with our finance department recommendations and our long-term plan at this time. And he further recommends that, or suggests that we can consider additional cuts. So what do you think, Mr. Carroll?
Yes, Mr. Chair. The potential of moving the insurance over to debt service for paint. The cost over here in the third column is 461,000, but we're showing 50,000 over here. Can you explain that? I don't know how this new scheme might work.
So the 461,000 is like the total amount annually that we're paying for those three programs. The proposal on here is consider moving just 50,000 of it off for 1 year, maybe then increase that to 100,000 the following year, 160 the following year, 160 the following year. Try to reduce the total amount of impact on, if that makes sense. So it's not putting all of it on just a portion of it.
But and for a penny in for a pound, I would think, I mean, if it's legal and we can do this, why would we incremental instead of just doing it all?
It'll have an immediate next year levy impact again with the presumption that you're going to do it as an added amount on versus offsetting your other expenses. And we kind of play with that number of about $1 million of increased debt service for the following year equates to, almost $100,000 on, I'm sorry, $100 on $100,000 of property. So that was kind of the mindset of trying to incrementally impact your increases to your levy. But you can legally, you can do that. But let me caveat that though with, do keep in mind though, when we're doing our short-term borrowing though, you still have to get through the hurdle of a 3/4 vote on this is a good idea to do this borrowing. So that's kind of the check and balance.
And Administrator Langrick, you mentioned that this has been under discussion, the ability to write off insurance debt as a capital expense.
It is in the statute. It has not been, there's no case law associated with it, and no one has challenged it. There's no legal opinions with it. So right now it's taken as face value through recommendation or through opinion of Attorney Andy Phillips, that it's saying that, yes, you can do this, but it is yet to have been challenged in any case law that would differ from that opinion.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Carroll?
Just picking on one specific item, I'd really love it if we could digitize the resolutions. It's only $10,000, right?
That was how much money we had set aside specifically. Again, we're hoping to use, and Clerk Kalish, if you're on, you can probably help better describe it. We're hoping that the Muni code system that we're going to implement, the ordinance and the codification, will also have licensing rights for that. So we might be able to bridge and use some of that to do our own internal resolution digitization. Did I say that correctly, Clerk Kalish?
Yeah, I believe there's somewhat of a self-service storage bin, if you will, that we could use. It will not, I don't believe, have all of the, the bells and whistles of a hyperlink thing. I know we did look at various things where you could like type in the word dog and find all the resolutions for dogs. I don't think it's going to be that that great, but it may get us started. I think the self-servicing portion of what we have with Munich Code at this point really revolves around the codification project, which is what they're currently working on now. And that self-publishing software that we have, that we've approved with that, is really to be able to allow us to upload changes to the code and not have to pay a fee to Muni Code to do that for us. So they may have some capacity there, they may not, and I won't have that until we get the codification back. So the hope was, we've all struggled through looking through ordinances and resolutions with what we have for books. So my hope was to be able to start with something, even if it was very basic, or just to have something available. But if we cannot, then we'll just continue to use the paper like we do, and it will work. It's just, we're not being as efficient as we perhaps could be.
Not to take away what you can do, Supervisor Carroll, you can certainly take action to reincorporate those expenditures. Probably ask that it gets balanced against something else. And do keep in mind at the bottom of your tallies there, the positive amount in this case is actually an abundance. We're taking out more than is requested in 2024 with these recommendations. We're actually a little bit under in 2025, and then a few thousand over in 2026 and 2027. So yeah, I'll stop there.
Just for clarification, if we took all your recommendations, we'd be under, did you say?
Yes, well, for 2024. For 2024, there's $46,000 in space, and that's kind of done with the mindset that we think other committees and departments may have troubles in trying to meet theirs. So we tried to create a little bit of extra space where we could, as well as listing out the other options. So that kind of gets weighted in it too. It's up to you folks to decide internally, but then all these are going to come back to you then as well. You're going to be kind of tasked with helping them sort through priorities based on the different departments as well.
Right,
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Carroll,
yeah, I want to make sure I understand these totals down at the bottom. If I wanted to see how much would be shifted to a referendum if we did one, is that total here? Or we have, is that another figure?
It is not. It is not. The items that we have listed with, yes for the referendum are not totaled separately.
Could we do that?
I can.
it's very disappointing to see, and say the least, because it was always my hope to see us enter the, not the 21st century, at least get closer to it, with our administration. Those were the things that were lacking. I sure don't want to not have an administrator or an administrative assistant though. And those, I know those aren't recommended. They're put out there though for discussion. So anyone want to tackle that one, Tim?
Yeah, I think I can nail on that comment. But can you kind of walk through what the process was for deciding that these top 4 positions were something that we could do without? The elephant in the room being, there are some people in those positions today, the bottom 4 there are. So maybe it's no more complicated than that, but can you talk about potentially what we're giving up over these 4 years without an HR or finance director, for example? Is that, I personally believe that may be the source of some savings for us in payroll expense in the future.
To have an HR director, potentially, there are potentials that you're going to find more efficiencies. There are different kind of flows with that, but yeah, that's the reality of it. Is it's status quo. It's what we have today, trying to make what we have work today with added expectations. Like we'll talk about later here, we're going to presumably things are looking like an ETF plan is going to be a desired option for you folks to take action on today. And with that, then you're going to have an administrative burden kind of to that with some of our corporate things and other things in order to try to maintain compliance with that. If we're adding in a financial officer, I mean, that would be most excellent to have somebody in kind of a controller role that can monitor continually, weekly, daily budgets and expenditures, and being able to understand where things are going and to be able to keep an eye completely on, on the ball when it comes to budgets. Right now, that is kind of a shared role of Derek watching pieces and our county supervisor watching pieces with changes on the general ledger and being getting involved, trying to watch and do the reporting element. And Derek and I get together and review vouchers, and we try to make it to work the best we can, but it's not just one set of eyes and one set of brain. It's totally in keep with the ledger and expenditures. With an HR coordinator, we struggle right now with a lot of it is distro out to departments. I'm trying to initiate a lot of the policy drives and recruitments and retentions and separations. And even when we have new employee orientations and benefit managements, it's all kind of that elements get dumped on Tammy Hendrickson as the benefits and payroll coordinator. So it's a challenge. Now saying that you'd like to have one of the ones on the top in exchange for one of the ones on the bottom, that may be appropriate as well. Kind of looking in the short term and not to, as an example, looking in the short term, having a controller to sort out the financial situations and keeping that versus administrator functions might be a debate worth having. Whether or not then that's having a full-on controller we can do without an administrator and go back to administrative coordinator or reduced administrator, or perhaps just changing the administrator's key duties to a controller type of a role and do it all with, kind of back off on some of this other strategic initiatives. Conversations to be had. I mean, any one of these, if you want to have one and try to take away one of the other ones though, then it's just well, are you creating a new job title and those other duties though that are currently being done by the existing ones, are they just gonna backfill and you're just kind of changing the job title might be another talking point as well. So I don't know if I really answered anything, Supervisor Gotcho, but those are some of the things that come to mind.
Ms. Luck, would you comment, please?
Um, So one of the things I've been thinking about here is just that, I'm not sure, like, I'd want to vote on these today only because I think some of these things, how I would vote on something within this would be impacted by how other things are handled. So for example, let's take economic development. If we were to do what is said with the economic development and whether the county backs off of that and whether we have that, then would we cut Southwest Regional Planning? Because then where would the source of any kind of economic development for the county happen? And so I sort of feel like I can't make it, and plus we just got this document. I would hate to vote on this today without really thinking that through, and maybe that's when it all comes back to finance, all of those resolutions come back to finance. What you're saying is that's when we can kind of balance all of those things. So it doesn't matter whether we vote today on this, when they all come back, finance will again have the opportunity to look.
Yeah, unless there were specific things right now that you see this internally and you're like, these are our priorities, you might take action on it today, but yes, all these items, including what other departments are putting together, should all be coming to you folks, presumably the first meeting in November for most of them. Now, there are some that have extended deadlines.
Right, but most of the October 31st.
Fairgrounds, yes,
Right.
but the ones that are October 31st, I'm planning on that discussion happening that first week in November, which is week after we just hopefully are adopting a budget. So now we're readjusting already to 2024.
So approval today just means these are the items that we're considering, but we wouldn't take any kind of formal action until after we've seen all of the resolutions that come back from
You don't
all
have
the
to,
committees.
you wouldn't have to take any action today, unless, I guess I'd recommend if you were adamant that you wanted to have discussion on, no, this is coming off, or no, this is staying on, or no, administrative coordinator, this is cockapoo because we're not really doing reductions, we're just shifting funds, or different things like that. If you folks had adamant, strong feelings that you want to start chewing on it today, I would recommend that. Otherwise, you could sit on it until the other ones come back at your next meeting.
Okay. Anyone else? Mr. Coy, Brad Williamson.
Is there any way you can put some type of maybe a justification, so there's adding these people, that we're saying we want to cut, originally we wanted to add all this HR, we want to add there's a value there. You know what I mean? So we're seeing what the cost is, but there's a value there too. And how much of that can they recoup with this cost? And it's hard, I'm sure there's probably no real solid way of saying that, but I mean, it says it's $105,000 here, let's say, just for that. Now, what do they bring us in $200,000 because of what they're doing? You know what I mean? A lot of positions have justification, and I think trying to understand what the justification is. I mean, we do this every month. We go through in a smaller, maybe in a different form or different group, and they come in and say, I need this person, and they justify it because they're gonna do this, this, and this. I mean, we're not seeing any, I don't believe that it's a total $105,000 that position costs. You know what I mean? It may be $40,000. It may not cost us anything. It may cost us $105,000 now because we don't have it. I guess that's the point I'm trying to get at is I'd like to see if there's some way we can say, okay, is there anything that would come off of that? You know what I mean? Before I made a decision, say, I don't want this, because I think it's needed. I think all of those positions are needed. But I don't really believe that they're gonna cost the county that much money, because I think they're gonna save the county money when they're in place.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. How that's gonna arrive though on your budget or your general ledger, if you keep the expenditure here is that you're gonna gain efficiency, so maybe you'd have to have a knowing reduction in other, say if you're in other departments or other areas to try to recoup that or some other type of a revenue line without having a direct, say it's like for your administrator. So you brought in an administrator to help you try to balance and manage all your budgets and doing exactly what you're doing right here today. How do you put a value with that? It gets to be a challenge because again, when you're just looking at it year by year budget, it's like, well, yes, it costs us money to have a position like this, but overall, we're able to manage all this and through the entire process, we're doing so much of a reductions or so much of a revenue added. But it does become a challenge then when our entire organization is locked into an annual budget. But I understand what you're saying. We can try to maybe put some type of a projected type of thing on there, but it's going to remain a challenge to try to have it solidified and hard as to if you do an added, or you do an added expenditure to line 10.5, 115 your budget, where's that being offset and balance is going to be a challenge.
And that's the, I mean, I get it, and it's just more of a comment than anything, because they add value. I know they add value. It's just, everybody wants to know what the actual cost is and what's the value, you know? And that's what you're trying to do. I mean, it's unfortunate that we have to do this every year. I agree, but, you know, I think it makes perfect sense to go down this road with adding these, you know, creating these positions. That's what we said a year ago, 2 years ago, whatever it was. Now to go through and to get rid of all that, we're not gonna get anywhere. I'm with Marty. We're just not, we're not going forward. We're going nowhere. And I think we need to go forward, so.
And your options to you again on that, not taking out the value and just coming right back to a numbers on it is, you want to have these things incorporated, potentially you can, but then they're really the only leverage that you kind of have on this specific scheme of things that are before you today is potentially then increasing more expense off to like a short-term notes for insurance to free up more operational expenses is what you're working with specific today. Doesn't mean though, if you consider other types of elements to it, ARPA funds, some other fund balance, again, trying to figure out where the actual dollars and cents arrives at. The conversation expands that maybe those things do get included and maybe kind of reaching back to the Supervisor Lux thing, any type of action is done most appropriate with this document in conjunction with having the other pieces that are in front of you.
So, Mr. Chair, can I comment one thing?
Ms. Luke, go ahead.
So these numbers are minuscule compared to what public safety is facing. We have $1.668 million that we're supposed to try. And the only way to, I mean, maybe we can come up with a few thousand here and there, but for the most part, it's going to be positions being cut is the only way that we're going to be able to meet those numbers. So when we're talking about cutting half our deputies, to me, these numbers become, you know, we have no choice but to make cuts like these. So, so that's what I'm struggling with, of trying to figure out how, you know, that, and I mean, I have to say that I'm not quite sure I agree with public safety. I realize that public safety takes the biggest chunk of the levy, but they're also the reason why counties were formed was for public safety functions and emergency management and all those things. So I'm struggling a lot with that. And I think our departments in public safety are really, really struggling because this is 200,000. They're dealing with 500,000, over 500,000 one year, 500,000 the next year, 300 and some thousand the next year, 200,000 the next year. I mean, it's significant. So, you know, I'm really struggling with how we're going to put all these pieces together. That's just my general comment.
Mr. Williamson?
I agree with Melissa as well. But I remember when I first got on the board, it's like, who does HR? I mean, so now we have all of us who are every mill off the street trying to hire, and we didn't have to really fire anybody, but we did a lot of hiring in the years that I've been on here with really no experience. So, but it's easy picking because we don't have it. So, well, it's not here. Let's just take it off the, but when are we ever going to get it? And I agree with Marty and Mr. Gottschall and Mr. Cooey that, yeah, this is really a struggle. It's, I don't know how we're gonna get there, but and it sounds like our administrator is already doing some of the duties, but then maybe that will free up if we would happen to be able to afford to do this. I don't know, is there any way you could do a percentage by department? But then again, you're pulling money out of, it's, I mean, it's pulling here and dropping there, but
Mr. Manning, we're going to do the round and round on here. Any comments?
Wouldn't want to be in Clint's position. I don't like being where we're at, but, in any business, and I think of the,
It's that gray button on the bottom, underneath. Right at the end. There you go, you're on.
in any business and any entity, things have to budget out. Like it or not, you could have the best employee in the world. If you can't pay him, he's not happy, you're not happy. Somehow we gotta make it balanced. And everybody's correct, it's not gonna be easy, but we have to make it the budget balanced.
Thank you. Mr. Murphy Lopez, did you want to comment generally?
Sure. So I'm having a hard time with how this is laid out right now. Not format wise. I think format wise, this makes a lot of sense to me, but just, I think recommendation wise, I just think, I kind of wonder, have we looked at other counties and like ours and how they deal with finance and HR between the clerk and the administrator and the number of staff they have compared to the number of staff we have? I just think there are some changes that we could be making. I just hear about some things sometimes, the way we do things. It seems like we could be implementing greater efficiencies and we could get some of these positions if somehow we did some of those things. And so I agree with the comments before where people said, are we really getting anywhere? Are we moving forward? And this doesn't really seem like we are moving forward. The other piece that I don't think I agree with at this point is putting those new positions on the referendum. I just don't think, I think that's a hard sell. I think people are going to be like, well, you hired an administrator. Why do you need an HR director now? Why do you need a finance director now? You hired an assistant to the administrator. Why do you need those? So I don't think I don't think it's appropriate to do that. If anything, I probably think that the reduction in service hours is a little more appropriate. I think that's something people, it's a little more tangible for people. It happened with our driver's license office. The state reduced the hours. People could, say, okay, do I want to give up Fridays or do I not want to give up Fridays? And that might affect how I'll vote on the referendum. So those are just my thoughts at this point.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else on the screen that I can't see right now want to comment?
Mr. Chairman,
See,
just as a guest, a question with regard to some of the items in administration. Right now, HR and benefits specialist, much of that is done by Tammy, and then some is dissipated among department heads and the administrator himself. Is that correct?
yes, that is correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. C, yes. Did you want to continue or? Did we
No, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm sensing a reluctance on the part of this committee to take action on this today, at least until we visit item number 16, the agenda.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
I would be interested in hearing your thoughts.
my thoughts. Well, they echo yours. We're gonna have to, Gary said he would hate to be in Clint's position. Gary, I would hate to be in your position, or yours, or yours, or yours, or mine. because we are going to be faced with making some really, really tough decisions. And um, I agree with Sean. Yes, we can't have a referendum saying we want to expand our administration area, therefore we want you to pay more tax. We can't do that. But we certainly can have a referendum that says in the next 3 years, we're going to be cutting how many million from public safety?
1.668.
Yeah, well, we can say that. And
Well, maybe, I mean, unless we determine that number was not appropriately assigned to public safety and the cut should be made elsewhere.
yes, okay. So those are my thoughts. We got some tough sledding ahead, so. But we have to take up the mantle and do it. All right, I think we'll move ahead then on the agenda. And the discussion and possible action, other resolution committee responses, we got to hold off on that.
We do have,
Mr. Chairman, just one final comment about reduction of hours
Yes, Mr. Seaman.
of hourly employees. Basically, sure, it's a cut in expenses, but it's also it's a cut in wages for hourly employees. The salaried employees, they're going to work 40 hours or 45 hours or whatever it takes. There's no, they're under a different FLSA standard than the hourly employees. So we wouldn't be reducing the salaries of the salaried employees, but we would be reducing substantially the income of hourly employees. And that seems to be contradictory to our goal of providing a quality future for employees and a sense of growth and security. And certainly contradicts our desire to retain and recruit employees as well. I'm a little uncomfortable with the reduction of hours.
The county used to be open Saturday mornings. We got rid of those a long time ago. Just a thought. Mr. Langren, did you have a comment?
I was just going to mention, we also have in your discussion of possible action regarding ad hoc committee requests for
Yes.
referendum items for consideration. If you think it is within the realm of which I would petition for that it is to allow for presentation on the ad hoc committee education. I don't think we got to that last meeting. It is in your folder as item 09. Is the, see my computer is being in here. Let's look like I can pull it up on the screen. Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Carroll.
If we're gonna go through that now, we really need to look at the version in the ad hoc committee's, last meeting. 6A in that folder is the one that we passed from committee and was the current version.
See if I can navigate to that and pull it up here.
Has anyone not seen it yet? I've seen this presentation twice. Just curious. You've seen it twice? Yeah, so I'm
So,
just,
we're good at this point?
should we spend committee time? Because do you have to leave at 3?
I have to leave it before then.
Yeah, so I'm just curious. I've seen it twice, so I don't know that I need to see it again unless someone's not seen
It
it.
was presented at the Simon's meeting by Frank. So
And it's at public safety and it was at land and zoning.
Yeah.
And I don't know about other committees.
probably everyone has seen it.
What about public safety or public works? Have you guys seen it yet? Or you haven't seen it?
We did not because we lost quorum.
Well, then maybe it is worth going over. It was just a comment that,
And
Mr. Cooey, have you seen it?
Well, I've looked at it,
Yeah.
but I don't need someone to explain it to, I mean, You can read it.
Well, maybe someone could give us the highlights, Mr. Carroll, you want to?
Yeah, I was assigned to quickly go through it.
Okay.
I'll be prompt.
See if I can get my computer to cooperate here. It's totally Dave's fault. Come on.
Sound reduction of hours.
Basically, this will be the starting point for the education effort. This phase especially, where we're trying to show how we got here, what status is, and what makes up our budget. And so, Sean did most of this with a little input from us, and, we tried to do a combination of graphics that would make it helpful to see the relative impact, and then, of course, the text getting as summarized and succinct as we could, but it points out some in how the shortfall has gotten to where it has, explaining the background on the reduction in state revenues. It showed where the largest expenses are that are levied, supported by the tax levy. So, and that's part of the reason that some departments are more impacted than others, is that they have more impact or more ability to shift the levy. And so that's the problem. We have things that we value here that you can't really put a dollar on that well, but they're still important. And yet dollars is how we pay for these things. So again, I'll be short, but if you go through here, it pretty well tells the story of we have tried to hold a tight budget, but things outside our control have made it harder. And so I'll just leave it at that for now.
Sean Murphy Lopez, did you care to comment?
I would just encourage people to look at especially the charts. And I think that chart on the second to last page kind of gets to the point that Supervisor Luck was making earlier. I think the referendum committee is going to have to struggle with, say one department, like the sheriff's department comes back with, we'd have to cut half of our 20 or 25 deputies. I think one of our struggles is going to be, then are we going to recommend that to this committee to put on the referendum? Because in my opinion, we can't put it on the referendum unless we're really going to cut it, because otherwise we're going to lose the trust of the public. So that pie chart, I think, kind of lays out the cuts that have to be made by area. And I think we need everyone serious, as good of answers as they can give us about what would have to be cut, and make sure that things are going to be fair across the board with all the departments. And so we've got a big job ahead of us on the referendum committee to come up with something for you all. So that second to last page that's really the big one. And we got to look at the big picture. We can't just defend our own turfs anymore. We got to look at the big picture.
Thank you. I think it's interesting knowing that the current plan that the state has, that the shared revenue that we get, I've always blamed the Walker administration for that, but apparently it came about during the Thompson administration, and it was an attempt to somehow curb what they felt were out of control property tax increases in the various counties. The state said, hey, we're going to put a lid on this, but we're going to share revenue with you in another manner. And that's where the shared revenue stream came from. And obviously, the formula that they came up with isn't working. At that time, suppose the economy was seeing a building boom, I don't know, but in this county if it was. Other than Dane County in Wisconsin, I don't know if any county is experiencing a major building boom because it's indexed to a certain percentage of new construction, the amount that you can increase your levy. So I guess that really gives me some history though. I kind of wish, well, never mind. So I think that I don't think we're ready, Mr. Murphy Lopez, to give you the Finance Committee's recommendations for the referendum. When do you need them?
October 31st. That's the date that we have laid out in the resolutions for this committee to get them. And I'm assuming it'll be okay if the referendum committee receives them as well, so we can weigh them and come back with a recommendation to this committee.
Thank you.
Mr.
Okay.
Chair.
Yes, Mr. Williamson.
Just a side note, we did have a Tri-County Airport meeting yesterday, and I believe, don't quote me on the dollar amount, but Sauk County is struggling with, I believe, 4.4 million for next year. They have already been advised, even at our little dab of budget, that the airport takes through Sauk County. So we are now old.
And they get all that sales tax money. Boy.
And Mr. Chair, if I could just add one thing too, there is a perception right now among the state legislature that we are, at least from one of our representatives who I talked to at the fair, that we are the only county with the problem. So, and that the counties association doesn't think that this is such a huge problem across the state either. So we've definitely got our work cut out for us because joint finance is going to be setting up the next 2-year budget pretty soon here. They propose it in March. And so if they truly think that there's no problem, I'm sure they're going to keep shared revenues at about 1.2 million. And we're down $1 million, and that's a quarter of our budget gap. So we've got a big perception problem in the legislature.
Great, thank you. It's not good to hear. Representative Kurtz was at your last meeting, was he not?
Yes, he came to the referendum committee, but it was not him.
It's encouraging. Okay, Administrator Langrick, can we go on to deficiency report?
Deficiency reports today, looking for main focal point is going to be on the resolution, the 10 Res 22-XX document. It's a deficiency report resolution. It's essentially going to be leveling your buckets for these different funds. On there, you'll see the elections fund at 25,000, UW Richland outlay at 7,000, Simon's Recreation Complex Fund at 95,000, Local Emergency Planning Committee at 1,000, Campus Food Services Fund at 70,000, Conservation Planner and Technician Fund at 87,000. So these are separate funds outside of the general intent fund, which is your lapsing fund. These are non-lapsing funds. This would be to set these at an even number coming into the 2022 year to set them at 0. So it's like kind of an accounting practice on there. Supporting this document today, you'll see 2 other documents of the, and there is 10-2021 breakdown by department, 10-2021 breakdown by line, showing the different appropriations and where the expenditures, expenditures, and the orders were. And I would defer to Clerk Kalish if available for further explanation. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Clerk Kalish.
Mr. Chair, I believe the last time this came before was a month ago, and we had asked just for some brief explanation as to, and I realized that document you provided maybe says that, but I wasn't able to figure out like, why, I know why elections, because we had, and conservation planner technician, I believe that was an error of something not put in the right account. Something it wasn't that they essentially what I want to know is, did these departments overspend, or was it some kind of mistake that we're just correcting because they didn't put it in the right bucket?
Combination. There's, you're all starting until they get
Here
situated.
is Clerk Kalish in person.
And so these, it hasn't been balanced. We didn't balance in coming forward in 2022, so these are overages, if you will, stemming all the way back to 2021. So with the conservation planner technician, that was a position that we talked about 2 budgets ago. That it was initially proposed for me to propose cutting it out, and then we took action to add it back in. But it did not
But
get
it
added
was a
back into
mistake,
that
right?
budget.
So they didn't overspend their budget.
Not with the intentions of of you folks, but with the intentions of the budget that was brought forward through the system, correct?
Clerk Kalish, do you have comments?
Am I on here? I do not. Clint explained that these budget, do you all understand what the deficiency appropriations are and kind of how they work? Okay, I'll give you a very brief summary. So usually in March of every year, a report is ran, basically a cash trial balance report that looks at all the non-lapsing funds to figure out which ones have went over their allocated amount or in a credit state, right? So this is usually done in March before the items are sent to the auditor. So even when we send this information, or when this resolution usually sees you in March, it can also change based on what the auditors find in their audit. So I was not here when this was supposed to have been done in March of 2021. I came back obviously in May of 2021. So these deficiency appropriations are actually 2 years worth. So in 2021, you would have looked at 2020. And then this year in 2022, we're looking at 2021. So some of these totals are a little bigger than usual, and they should have been adjusted or addressed in a previous year, but they were not. So as Clint said, this is not money that we're gonna have to additionally pay out. It's just taking money from undesignated fund to set these balances to zero. So I believe this is brought forward to Finance and Personnel and to County Board because these funds are set up they're non-lapsing funds, so they're not meant to reset to zero like Fund 10, right? So you then have to decide, do you want to put money in these buckets to make them zero, or do you want that balance to carry through? So for instance, the conservation planner tech, like that one we just discussed, they didn't overspend. That was just, there was a data entry error in there, so there's that. But the ones like Campus Food Service, Simon's Rec, UW Richland Outlay, elections, those you can choose to refund them or not. If you say, no, we're not going to approve these efficiency appropriations, then fine. But those negative balances are going to carry and carry and carry. So they really won't ever be reset back to a point where you can look back and say, okay, well, in 2023, this happened. So that's the task at hand for you folks, is to decide if you want to refill the buckets or not. You choose not to, the negative balance stays, or, it becomes positive or worse, however, the cards fall.
Thank you. Ms. Love.
So I'm not in any way opposed to zeroing these out. I just want to understand, because I think the whole purpose of what we want to know when there's these deficiency reports is I want to know who's overspending their budget, so we can determine when they make their new budget for the next year, are they actually accurately reflecting what they spend, or do they overspend every year? So that's what I'm trying to get from this document. So I'm assuming that in all the other than I know what happened at the conservation planner technician, the other ones overspent their budgets for some reason or another. It wasn't
Yeah.
administrative error.
No, correct. So for whatever reason, elections, I wasn't here when that budget was created, but that budget went over 25,000.
Count or something.
Yeah, and so,
Recount.
or if there's a primary and there wasn't one budgeted, so I will always budget as if there's always going to be a primary because there may, so, yeah, I mean, if you look at UW Richland outlay, so when I ran the cash trial balance, which here's my notes, when I go to that Fund 32, because I really did look at each one of these and say, okay, were they actually overspent at the time that we ran the report, or are there other revenues coming in? Because sometimes, like in the case of HHS, those revenues won't come in until April. So there's a bit of a delay. And also remember, the auditors haven't done their job either. So they do make adjustments that do affect these balances. So I looked at the campus and it looks like there was a little bit of overspending in the boiler and furnace line and building maintenance and repair. So the ones that will come on the resolution are ones that we've looked at, determined that, yes, they are going to be over, and the amount we have is what we have, at the time the resolution is drafted. I do believe, as County Supervisor Wheelock provided you all with a Fund 10 report that showed all those for Fund 10, because when we brought this to you folks originally in August, there was more, you wanted more detail to see more. So you have Fund 10 there. Fund 10 does reset back to zero, so obviously there's going to be no deficiency appropriation to make to refill that bucket. So, answer your question?
So,
I would make a motion to. Should say,
all of them, a blanket approval.
yeah, I mean,
All right.
I think regardless of how they happen, I think we should reset them to zero, so next year, we
Right.
know in 2022.
We're
what
tracking.
happened,
All right.
Right,
Yeah, and you would be able to see the choice you made to refill that amount.
We have a motion then.
I second that.
A second by Mr. Carroll. All those in favor of this motion signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we did it. We passed something.
Mr. Chair, can I just make one
Yes.
comment? I was
Go ahead.
kind of the one who was trying to put the brakes on it last meeting, so I want to follow up. So I do think it's helpful to see Fund 10, but kind of the same theme as my questions with the budget for the 2023 proposed budget. What about other departments? It's a little challenging to see. Like I was just going through them and I was just trying to think of random departments. Some are in Fund 10, some are not. And so for transparency's sake, it would be helpful just to see like highway, that's not in there. So Pine Valley, that's not in there. Obviously they're enterprise funds. So they're in separate places. So I think that's kind of some of the challenge is just like, there's so many different buckets everywhere and how to boil it down to something that we really need to see. We don't need to see 200 pages that the clerk prints out. We need we're more high level, so that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Yeah, and I would agree with you, Sean. It's, you can boil this down to try to make it as simple as possible, but then if you boil it down too far, you miss all the detail you need to be, to see all this. So, there is the cash trial balance that is shared with you folks on a monthly basis too. So, that's a very quick way to look at that and look at that balance. And I know it may, if you're not familiar with it, maybe like Greek or something, but I would encourage you all to look at that, and if there's something you don't understand, that would be the time then on the monthly basis when you have that to reach out, and I'm happy to provide, whatever documentation that would make that, easier. So if there's something I can do, obviously let me know.
And Derek, I do think, Mr. Chair,
Yes, go ahead.
respond. I do think that the work that you helped do with the referendum committee, so we could boil things down and put things in charts, that was really helpful. And what I'm saying is I think we need something similar in this setting, because I've looked at the cash trial balance. I've been on the finance committee 4.5 years now. It's still Greek to me. And so that's why I'm saying, I think we don't need all that detail. We need something, a little easier to digest. And I think the products for the referendum committee was excellent. It's what we needed. It's been helping a lot of people understand our budget.
Thank you. With the committee's approval, I would like to go down to item number 16 on the agenda, because I want to be here for this discussion. I'm going to have to leave in a few minutes. It's after 1:37, so we're okay. And it's discussion and possible action on insurance for 2023 and health insurance, I'm assuming.
So I'll let Assistant Doe present the survey results, as well as then kind of the recommendation for you today.
So Cheryl, survey says, but
found it. I think it's.
I'm sorry, I jumped ahead on you guys.
It's having a grumpy day.
Okay, so we were able to pull as many as we could. This is the responses we got back. We gave them a deadline to do it. Because finance and personnel asked for this, 87 voted to go back to the ETF plan. 30 voted to stay with Wallace, Cooper, and Elliott, and then we had 6 voted others, so there was 3 requested to do the P12. Works without Wallace, Cooper, and Elliott, and then other information, they requested more education for them to make a decision. And the other one was stay with their husband's insurance.
And Cheryl, state plan P12, is that the one we're
No,
looking at?
it is the P17. So the P12 is 0 deductible. P17 is 1,500, 3,000.
Okay, it's a richer plan, P12, then, from the employee's point of view.
Yeah, so P12 was 0 deductible is what they had before they switched to a deductible.
Right.
So it's 0 deductible. And P17 is the 3,000 with $2,500 out of pocket.
Thank you. It was my concern that many of the employees thought that going to the state plan would be a return to what they had before. And apparently that isn't the case, except 4 people or whatever would like to see us do that, but they knew very well what they were looking at.
I think they would all like us to go back to that.
Right.
There's a big number difference in the, also with this, we have to pay 20% or $400 per family for the first year, 20% or $200 the first year for single. And then the second year is reduced down to 10% for single and family, and the third year then that fee being waived.
Okay.
There's also a whole list of comments, let's see, that I've included for you to read. I'm not going to read them all to you, but it's everybody's opinions and any comments we got back with the survey, I've included for you to read.
Okay. So what is the question then before us?
So the actionable item then is that if we're interested in switching to ETF or pushed against the timeline, this would have to be a resolution that makes it to the county board floor next Tuesday. Resolution language is included in here. It would be for us to re-enter participating in the P17 plan. It'll take certainly some administrative action to get those pieces going as open enrollment for that. Or the ETF begins on the 26th. So we'd have about 3 days of pending your action today, and assuming that would carry through the county board, we'd be reaching out to start getting all the pieces moving so that we can begin an open enrollment process on September 26th.
Thank you. And once again, Cheryl, what was the vote? I know you said it before, but how many people responded from county employees?
So let's see, total 203. Or I'm sorry, 123, I think.
Yeah.
Quick math. 87 voted to go back to the ETF. 30 voted to stay with Wallace, Cooper, and Elliott. 6 were other.
Okay, thank you. Committee, are you ready to make a decision on this? Mr. Carroll.
If we do decide to go back to the state line, what does that do to the county's budget? The county's proportion?
Mr. Langrick.
So we're still going to be under what we had budgeted for that 15% going into this year. So a lesser amount than the court's plan that we looked at last meeting. But again, kind of based on the trending assuming that the ETF plan stays at their 5.4, and if ours were to continue at our 10.25, I believe, pace, it would be ahead moving forward. So it's with a HRA reduction as well being taken off, we're going to come in under what we currently have built in the proposed budget. Does that answer your question?
So, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
Yes,
How much would it cost to put the HRA back in, or whatever that's called?
See if I can find that information.
and what's your question exactly?
So he's recommending we do the P17 plan with the state, but then not do HRA, what is it?
The health reimbursement.
Right, yeah, the HRA, that we currently put $1,000 towards a family deductible, is that right?
It's a
2,000? Thank you, $2,000 towards the deductible and 1,000 for single, or whatever it is. I'm just curious what it would cost to put that back in, and can we do that at least for this coming year with the savings?
Budget.
Just a good question.
I got the
Question.
budgeted amount, I think, for last. So there'll be two different numbers that you're gonna be factoring with. It'll be I don't have the number on what we would have had for 2023. Specifically, I think I was referencing a number for 2022 is around a $300,000 number, but when we budget that in, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's all getting expended, because whatever doesn't get expended comes back. So I think last year we looked at about $150,000 of actual expenditure from that. But it does take budget capacity, if that makes sense.
So what is your opinion of if we did it for this first year and then see how our budget looks, not make a decision about subsequent years? Is it worse to give it to them for 1 year and then take it away than to not give it at all? Or?
It's going to affect you either way. Just talking about it to now makes it feel like it's on the table for discussion, and now we're taking it away. The survey was set up as, do you want ETF with no HRA?
Right,
or
no,
do
I
you want
know.
this now? So how people feel an impact on social equity is going to be up to them. From a budgetary standpoint, you have funds for it, but it's, again, it's into that ARPA fund and then added expenditures that you're going to have to contend with going forward in the future years. Does that answer your question, Supervisor?
It does, thank you.
You making a motion? The sheriff wants to comment. Sheriff Porter will be speaking.
I just wanted to add, I appreciate what Melissa is asking for, but even half the amount would be, I think, looked upon favorably by the employees. That's kind of the number that was tossed around. A lot of people discussed at my department. I don't want to speak for everybody else's department, but that I saw the comments and I knew that at least some of them came from my department, so.
Okay,
Mr. Chair,
yes, Mr. Williamson.
question if with switching, do they have money that they will lose in an HSA? Was our previous plan to have an HSA, health savings account?
No.
Okay.
We operate with the HRA, like spending.
It's HSA and HRA are different ones. Before the fact, one's after the fact, so. Okay, anyone want to make a motion, and you can do the resolution as offered here, or you can make another amendment if you want to.
I'll make the motion for discussion that we offer the P17 plan with an HRA, is that the right term? An HRA? But I will go with what they just said, which is I have the amount of what we currently offer, so that would be 1,500, is that correct? So that's the motion I will make.
Okay, do we have a second to that motion?
Williamson will second.
Thank you. Mr. Carroll.
I was gonna second.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion to do the switch, but continue the HRA, but at a reduced level. Any more comments? That seems to me to be a fair way to proceed. My 2 cents worth.
Supervisor Luck, did you want to put that on as 1 year?
Well, I mean, just to be honest with the employees, that might be the best avenue, just knowing that it could be a lever we have to pull in subsequent years.
I don't know if Cheryl or Clint can find out if it changes the rate of insurance by going from 1 to 3 or whatever the possibilities are. As far as what the actual costs, I know you discussed it, but if we said 3 years versus a 1 year in the motion, if it would eventually reduce the cost per month by going 3 years versus 1 year.
They're gonna, for our HARA contributions, they're gonna be a fixed amount. I mean, that's gonna be, we budget into it on how many folks are participating into it, the HRA, based on what plan that they're signed up for. And then those expenditures aren't realized unless those members hit their deductible and then fill their deductible to the point where the plan or the county then pays the back half of that through the HRA. So you'll be budgeting for an amount up front, and based on trends, roughly maybe anywhere from 40 to 70% of it, depending on what claims are submitted and who hits it, will provide as an actual expenditure against that year's budget. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
So it won't impact the rates of the P17 insurance plan. It'll just be a separate line. Yeah.
I personally like the idea of being in the state pool because the pool is larger and it should result in more equal and fair premium increases annually. I didn't like the way we were rated before. It almost seemed like we were our own group and we're not big enough. Thousands, tens of thousands of people to make insurance level out. Are we ready to vote?
Mr. Chair, point of clarification, are we voting on 1 year of HRA or leaving that language out?
I don't think we put any language like that in, did we, Melissa?
No, I just made the comment that might be I guess I would add that language, just to be fair. I mean, it's not saying we're going to take it out after next year. I just want the employees to know exactly where we're at. I don't want to have it be a surprise next year.
Well, you could add to be reviewed annually or something.
There you go. That seems like a reasonable, to be reviewed annually, the HRA part of it.
Just look at
Did
it.
you get that, Cheryl? Sorry. That's okay. Okay. All
Okay,
right, so that's the
so,
motion. So yes.
so the motion is to go to these state plans, right?
P17.
P17.
I have down to offer the P17 with the HRA of 500 single, 1,000 family to be reviewed annually.
The HRA to be reviewed. Okay. Are you ready to vote? All those in favor of that signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the motion carries. We can do the switch. Thank you. Handbook changes, discussion on proposed handbook changes. Employee handbook, Pine Valley addendum. Who's taking this?
I will take it. There's a lot of changes. I'm not gonna spend a lot of time reviewing them unless you want to. There's a lot of stuff to be covered yet this meeting. But I did break them down in the cover sheet by page and what we're doing with those clarifications. If there's any questions, I'll review the questions if that works for everyone. There's a lot of, And a lot of them are just cleanup, trying to make, stuff easier to find. I'm reporting.
Nothing hidden in there, Cheryl?
I tried not to hide anything. The only thing I will mention where we talked about where we changed the hours, and I don't know if I can find that up there. And that will be the first of the year where we're going changing. Let me find it, the handbook here. In the handbook, it's gonna be on page 12, but it's page 13 in the scrolling. These hours we're changing to match up so that all of our benefits will have the same amount of hours and we don't have different things. This 1,200 hours is minimum hours for retirement. So we just divided that out. And then now these hours will match all the way across for all the benefits.
Mr. Carroll?
Looks like the review was pretty fine tooth comb. Was this based on input from all the departments? Have they seen these already?
It was put out that they could go out and view it on this website. This was based off input from Clint, myself, and Tammy, who administers most of these.
So I see we have a number of department heads in the back of the room. I would ask them if they have reviewed this and do they have any comments at this time.
Share it with us. So the other significant one on here, you'll find on the bottom of page 16, top of page 17, regarding the vacation times. This committee had asked me about 8 months ago or so to come forward with a review on benefited time off, specifically in the realm of PTO vacation, what that all looks like. I think we had a follow-up conversation on it a few months ago where I presented on what that scheme would look like. That is incorporated in here on changing our allocations. So it would change it to date of hire being offered 1 week. Currently, it's 1 week is at 6 months. At 6 months, receiving an added week. And then 1 year, rather than receiving then an added week, receiving 2 weeks, receiving 3 weeks at 5 years, receiving 4 weeks at 10 years, and receiving 5 weeks at 15 years. There's also then added language that employees will receive a payout of up to 1 week that is not used for 18 months. That should be specific to employees that are here 15 years or longer. So that was kind of the changes we had worked through there.
Okay. I'm assuming that a vote on this will be,
We need a motion.
well, we need a motion
I'll make a motion. Make the changes.
and a second.
I'll second.
Okay,
Mr. Chair, I would like to make one motion to amend.
yes, Mr. Murphy Lopez. Mark Cooley will be chairing the.
Okay, so it would be on page 21. And it would be... Okay, so if the new Mr. Chair will allow me to speak.
Yes, address Mark Cooley.
Go ahead, John.
Okay, so it's on page 21, and it's on letter B. So I'd like to make a motion to amend that where it talks about advertising in the Richland Observer, that we make that optional. So I'm suggesting strike the word shall and replace it with may. And then I'm also suggesting in that first sentence to strike the words to run for at least 2 weeks. and not replace it with anything. So then it would read, the county administrator or department head may then place an advertisement in the Richland Observer. And the reason I'm suggesting this is because a year or two ago, this change had gotten through finance and personnel, and it somehow got lost in all of the changes that the other changes that were made. And then I asked Mr. Langreich about this in a recent meeting, and he said we never made that change, or he said that it's required that we have to be in the Observer. So I went back and I retraced the steps to figure out how this was left out. And so I'd like to try to get it in here now, if possible.
So Sean, you want that whole first sentence struck out?
No,
Okay.
that's not what I said. So my motion to amend would be striking the word shall and replacing it with the word may, and then striking the words to run for at least 2 weeks. So the first sentence would read, the county administrator or department head may then place an advertisement in the Richland Observer.
I will second that. And then,
All right. Can we vote on the amendment then? Everybody ready? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries. Now we'll vote on to approve the handbook as presented today. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. All right, next is number 12 in the personnel department or section of this, reclassification of deputy clerk to chief deputy.
Actually, I think you had a Pine Valley addendum.
We got
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
We just have some minor changes. I'll take questions. I've laid it out in the cover letter.
I would make a motion to approve them.
I would make a motion.
I'll second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you. All right, now we'll go to number 12, reclassification deputy clerk to chief deputy.
I will take questions as well.
Can we have some background?
In the packet, I provided you the information that I provided to the Public Safety Committee earlier this month. And included in there is the recommendation from Carlson Detman, and noted the discussions that I've had with Clint on this. I have 2 deputy clerks of court, similar to in a sheriff's department where there are multiple deputies. The sheriff has a chief deputy that he is able to appoint. I have the same statutory authority. I have wanted to pursue it for a long time, and I am now pursuing it. A few years ago, when I was sick, I didn't have a chief deputy. I actually had 3 deputy clerks in the office at that time, and none of them could agree who needed to do the work. So I guess this is a necessity, not that I'm, as you can see, I'm healthy. But I think this is a proper safeguard, and it's one that most clerks of court in the state have. I just simply have not formally pursued it. I kind of wanted to make sure that that I had a person in the office that was a proper fit for this, and that I was confident that this would be the structure for us to have. So the financial impact is minimal. But it is some impact. And I know early in your meeting, when you went through all of the lines for next year's budget, my department shows a levy growth for next year. If I again remove my health insurance and continue to stay on my husband's health insurance, actually I'll have a negative levy impact. So that's where things stand. You also were talking about curiosity, wanting to know where departments were at with their budgets. I do provide detailed reports to public safety every month. And 68% of the way through the year, I was at 62% of my expenditures and at about 90% of my revenue projection.
I would make the motion to approve this.
I'll second. Any comments, questions? If not, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. All right, we got increased juror pay rate.
Yes. And this is an appropriate item to bring up in September because September is Juror Appreciation Month. And we just had a jury trial this month and, or actually this week, Wednesday and Thursday. And so made sure to let the jurors know that they have the thanks of the county and they have the thanks of the county board. The county board is the one that by statute can set juror pay and never has in Richland County. And so that means Richland County just pays the default statutory minimum, which is $16 per day. So I am asking during this continued climate of very few jury trials in Richland County to increase the daily juror rate to $40 per day and also then have a half-day rate of 20. Half-day rates would be used for when jurors are here just for like the morning, because typically jury selection only lasts a couple hours. So like the trial that we had this week, we had 35 jurors reporting on Wednesday. 13 were selected, 12 plus an alternate. The remaining 22 were then let go. Their service was done. So if this were in effect, those 22 would get $20. The jurors who sat on and heard the case then for the rest of that day, they'd get 40. And then on the second day of the trial, those 13 jurors would get 40. So it's not a full financial impact of like going, oh gosh, 35 times 40. And it doesn't quite work that way.
So, and just a clarification, so if you got, did the other ones get the 16 at least for the?
Everybody, yeah, we don't, I think it would be a slap in the face to do half rate.
I was just.
So we don't do that in Richland County. We could. That would be pathetic. Don't even suggest
Yeah,
it.
no, I was just making sure they at least got $16 for showing up.
Yeah, and,
That's all I was making sure.
yeah, and this time around, this was the first time in a long time that I've had no shows. Granted, I have to summons quite a few people to get to the 35 because we're very liberal with our excusing them. If they, vacations are an automatic, you're excused. Doctor appointments, medical issues, automatic, you're excused. But I'm kind of like, I'm not gonna say, no, you got problems at work or you got a meeting at work or you're short-staffed at work, you gotta be here. Other counties might do that. In Richland County, the judge has always deferred to the clerk of court to have the back and forth with the jurors. And if somebody tells me I absolutely cannot, I had a couple nurses this time that said, we're gonna be so short, and I just excused. So I know what number I have to start at when I summons a panel to get to where I need so that we have enough people to pick the jury. It's kind of it's a dance every month. But this time around, we had, of the people that were supposed to be there and sign in, every single one of them came in. But, yeah, I think it would be just a nice thing. Other counties pay a little bit more. You're never gonna pay them enough to, particularly for the ones whose employers don't reimburse them, you know, but.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve.
All right, we got a motion on the floor. Did I get a second?
I'll second.
Second.
Discussion?
Discussion, yes.
I'm all for it, but the wording of this resolution isn't quite right.
Oh, yeah, you're correct. It should be to the motion to approve and forward to the county board.
Right, I would move that we revise the wording to reflect that.
Thank you.
All right.
So we're voting on
I mean, that's basically a type. I would say this is a typo, just clean it up. I mean, we just gotta get the right
I
language.
didn't change it when
Public safety.
yeah, because the meeting was like, that day I had to get it to Cheryl that afternoon, so I
Yeah.
missed that.
I think we can just make the adjustment and be fine, just so that it says to go to the county board versus personnel finance.
A motion to approve and forward to county board
Yep.
the request to raise the pay for the Richland County jurors to a full day rate of $40 and a half day rate of $20, with the new rates in effect January 1st, 2023.
Sounds good. I think that's what our motion was for.
Okay.
Since it's cleaned up. All right, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Motion
You have
carries.
one question.
Yes.
Do they get a per diem at all?
Yeah, they get the mileage, so that's considered the 16 or 40 or 20, that's considered their per diem, and then the mileage is at whatever the current rate is. I think it's 51 and a half or something.
You gotta drive a long ways to make any money
Yeah,
and.
you gotta come to tax.
That's the price of gas.
Then you don't make any money.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, number 14, restructuring of behavioral health services unit. Then we get all four, maybe 5 of them. Go ahead, it's all yours.
Okay, so in our mental health unit, we currently have 5 mental health therapist positions. We are asking that 3 of those positions be converted to mental health case manager positions. They would be service facilitators for our comprehensive community services. We just feel this would be a better utilization of the positions that we have within our unit. Our CCS program is fully funded by Medicaid. All of their time is fully reimbursed by Medicaid. And we are just asking that these 3 positions be converted to a lower grade.
Any comments, questions? Need a motion? Here's a motion, second.
I'll second.
Second from Melissa, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Yep. So then we've got proposed organizational chart. We'll just go right down, as we just go right down through them. If I'm reading this right.
Proposed organization chart, sorry. We just provided that to you to how it's going to look, so it just has that information in there of those positions being changed.
So is that the orange or whatever that's on, I mean, we got it color, I don't know if you got it, yours printed color.
You don't see it?
Yeah, so the orange are the new positions that we are asking for. So 3 would be county positions. Currently, we have 3 service facilitator positions that are contracted with Southwest. And we're asking that those kind of be eliminated, the lease positions, and have them be county positions. But again, we're not adding new positions, we're removing those mental health therapist positions.
So no actions needed there.
No, this is just visual for
Yeah.
it. Is there anything else that needs action on this?
I don't believe so.
So we're good to go. Is there anything else you want to explain to us while you have the floor?
No, I just have, the next one is mine too.
Okay, let's go on with the next one. So we're on 15 with blood drive.
So right now, there's a blood shortage in the state of Wisconsin, and DHS is giving employers who host a employee blood drive $25 per individual who gives blood. And so we are asking that we can be a provider of this service and that employees be able to do it on work time.
So it looks to me like what we're being asked is we're being asked to say it's okay for employees to donate blood while they're on county time.
Correct. Provided, of course, the departments are also okay with a lot of them to leave to come over and do that.
So the department head has the discretion to say, no, I'm sorry, you can't go today because we just are swamped, or
Yes, well, in
it's up to the department
situations,
head.
certainly with trying to maintain, especially with minimal staffs, so.
Right.
Sheriff Porter in a position, whereas all of his jailers are gonna say, no, I'm.
Donating blood right now.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Okay.
it may switch to cat, they can say, no.
All right, I'll make the motion to approve then with that.
All right, can I get a second? Steve was the, Steve Carroll was the second.
There we go.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
I-
Aye, motion carries. Yes, I don't think they want to go down there. 16's done. We got 16, so we're going to 17.
Yes, thank you. We would, our follow-up then, Mr. Chair, would be to come back around to items 5 and 6 with discussion of the 2024 budget.
There you go, Clint. Otherwise, we were gonna be done, you know that, right? You see how I just kind of work right through this? Go ahead, Clint.
So coming back around, then you've made your decision to incorporate in the changes of switching to the P17 plan and reducing the HRA by half. We'll also then be incorporated into the 2023 budget, yet the 1 week with holding will still have to come into it. Then the land conservation family plan will come out of it. So those would be the changes we would be making. Again, I'm looking for a motion language today to accept the finalized budget with amendments reflecting decisions on health insurance plan, direct administration and departments to make adjustments accordingly, direct the county clerk to make necessary public posting, present to the Richland County Board for consideration and adoption at its October meeting, Mr. Chair.
All right,
I would so move.
Steve with the motion, Gary was the second. Any discussion? No discussion. Guess we'll call for a vote. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Opposed, motion carries.
Budget, any future agenda items that you might have for us, Mr. Chair.
Does anybody have anything for the next agenda?
I think we have enough to be going on with.
I'll go around the room. So Gary, do you have anything?
I just have one question for Clint. I know we discussed a month or so ago, but did you find out anything about the chances of raising our sales tax?
Raising sales tax is limited by statute on what we can do with sales tax.
You
I can
look into that? Did you find out anything?
further than knowing that. I can look to Wisconsin Counties Association, but I'll put that for an agenda item for next time discussion on.
Melissa? Steve? Steve?
Nope.
Sean? Sean's still on? Yeah, he's there. Sean, you're on mute. All right, well, then I guess let's see. The next thing I need is a motion to adjourn. Gary with a motion.
Second.
Second, Melissa, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
All right.
Motion carries. Thanks, well, we need a date for adjourning too.
That would be our October 4th would be our usual date. Time is also, would be the usual. If it's a reason to deviate from that, you'd have the opportunity now.
I would say there's always an interest in deviating from that time, but I think at some point, we need to, get everybody together and see what can work well for everyone.
Maybe that's an agenda item then, is to
It
actually sit
probably
down and
is.
just talk about what dates
Maybe we should
and
do that.
times. It's mostly times, right, Steve?
It's time, yeah. 1 o'clock is difficult for
People who have a
at
job.
least half of us. I mean, it gets to be a challenge. And then if you go any later than Marty, it's difficult for Marty. I mean, it's just difficult in
If we
general.
go in the evening, then all the department heads.
All the department heads have to come in and then they got to take the next day off or something, but they might. I don't know. All right, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.